Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now usually you'd expect to slot a graphics card into your PC. With this however it's sort of the other way around. This is the Beelink GTi12 Ultra and EX docking station. These aren't sold exclusively together, though you can buy the bundle, but alternatively you can buy a GTi Ultra series mini PC and then add the dock if you want more graphical power later on. We'll get into that later because I want to talk about the system itself first. The GTi12 Ultra at the time of this upload sells for £479.85. For that, we get an i9-12900H, 32 gigs of 4800MHz DDR5, and a 1TB M.2 SSD. Around the outside we have USB 3 ports, USB-C, HDMI display port, dual 2.5G Ethernet ports, fingerprint sensor, basically everything you'd expect to find on a modern small form factor machine like this. There is also a built-in microphone array and more surprisingly speakers. If we pop the bottom cover off we can see them sitting next to the internal 145 watt power supply. This is also a welcome feature that eliminates the need for the usual power brick that comes with so many smaller machines. Before we move on, here's a quick speaker test. They're okay at best, tinny like built-in monitor speakers often are. Still, I suppose they're nice to have. Beelink definitely made full use of all the space in this little enclosure. Before we add the dock, let's see what the GTi12 Ultra can do on its own. We have the 14-core, 20-thread 12900H, 32 gigs of 4800MHz RAM and Iris Xe graphics. The CPU has a lot more to give and that's where the EX dock will come in later, but the Iris Xe graphics are still somewhat capable in lightweight or esports titles. Here are a few examples. We'll start with Cyberpunk 2077, which is actually the hardest game to run and not the sort of title I'd probably recommend when using these graphics. So we have the lowest settings, Intel Xe SS set to balanced, for an average frame rate of 38. The 1% low was 19 and the 0.1% low was 14, so this is definitely struggling a bit, but it is still playable with these settings though. As I mentioned before, it's games like Counter-Strike 2 for example, which will run a lot smoother on this mini machine with the built-in graphics solution. At the lowest settings at 1080p, CS2 will hit 98 FPS with a 1% low of 61 and a 0.1% low of 6. I was hoping for at least 60 frames per second and we certainly got that here. For GTA 5, 1080p with the normal settings and sliders halfway with FXAA, we saw 86 frames per second with respectable and consistent percentile lows of 72 and 66 respectively. Finally, for the integrated GPU test, we have Apex Legends, 1080p with the high textures and everything else set to lowest. I also chose to enable the adaptive resolution slider and try to target at least 60 FPS, which this system did. In fact, we saw 79 FPS, our 1% low was 57, and our 0.1% low was 42. So as it is, it's a fine mini machine with what I feel is a competitive price as far as the market for mini PCs are concerned. But now let's whip out the special attachment so that we can plug our PC into our graphics card. I really like the aesthetic of this thing. It reminds me of a PlayStation 1 in both colour and texture, and I mean that in the best possible way. Takes me back to the 90s, all of the 6 years I experienced of it. At the time of writing, the multifunctional EX docking station retails for £119.40, or as part of a bundle with a GTi12 Ultra for £554.33. GTi 14 bundles are also available, and you'll save some money buying them together, again at the time of upload. The dock has a built-in 600W PSU and comes with two 8-pin power connectors, the cables of which slot directly into it. There's also a fan header on here, USB port and Wi-Fi or SSD support underneath. Just like the GTi12 Ultra, there's no external power brick. Once everything is put together and the bundle has reached its final form, it'll still sit neatly atop your desk. It's simply a case of slotting the PC into the dock, adding the GPU bracket, the GPU itself, and then connecting the power cables and any required adapters to the card. I'm using a 4070 Super today. I powered on the dock, followed by the mini PC, and before you know it, we were at the Windows 11 Pro desktop. No additional steps required. Apart from the NVIDIA driver installation of course. Keep in mind that this dock uses a PCIe X16 connection but has an X8 electrical interface, so the 4070 Super here, which normally runs in PCIe X16 4.0 mode, is limited to X8 4.0 mode, but honestly, any performance impact will be minimal and I'll be touching on that at the end. First though, let's see how our i9-12900H and 4070 Super pairing performs. Back in Counter-Strike 2 now, 1440p with the highest settings for an average of 289 FPS, a 1% low of 122 and a 0.1% low of 62. Apex Legends at 1440p, I tested all the games at 1440p by the way, with the highest settings, spot shadows off and TSAA for an average of 221, a 1% low of 159 and a 0.1% figure of 32. GTa12 1440p, highest settings, advanced settings set to max and FXAA instead of MSAA for an average of 119. The 1% figure was 88 and the 0.1% low was 77. In Forza Horizon 5, which didn't want to start with the Iris Xe graphics, we saw 126 FPS here with the Extreme preset and TAA when using our 4070 Super. The 1% low was 104 and the 0.1% figure was 88. Finally, it's Cyberpunk 2077, which at 1440p with the Ultra preset proved quite the challenge for the 4070 Super, attaining 76 frames per second. The 1% low dropped below 60 FPS, it came in at 59, so not by much, and the 0.1% number was 51, so it was still quite consistent overall. And as you can see, this CPU and GPU are working quite well together, with the GPU often becoming the limiting factor at this resolution, which is what I'd expect. I also ran a few comparative benchmarks to the 4070 Super running in PCIe X16 mode in an i9-14900K system. The CPU is limited to 125 watts for the sake of my air cooler. I was also using 32 gigs of 4800MHz desktop RAM. It's not quite a fair comparison, but at 1440p the GPU is going to be hitting its performance ceiling before the CPU starts to struggle, so I think the figures are somewhat useful. The 12900H system fell slightly behind in the averages, but the 0.1% lows were more consistent. Make of that what you will, perhaps the 14900K desktop machine didn't like 4800 RAM all that much. Overall then, while I like the GTi12 Ultra, the dock is the star of the show. I'd like to see all future Beelink machines incorporate a PCI Express connection so that they can be used with this. I think it would really benefit their whole mini PC ecosystem, as we often see high-end processors limited by integrated graphics. Users could add a dock and external GPU whenever it suits them if they wanted to. The entire setup would still be pretty compact, so I don't think it completely defeats the object of what a tiny form factor system is all about. From a personal perspective, this would make an ideal portable benchmarking rig, one that would let me swap cards out easily without worrying about performance loss. As always though, I get that there is a market for this type of thing, and that's clear by the rate in which these systems hit the market, but it's always worth thinking about whether a custom small form factor build would be better suited for your needs and budget. I really do like this though. There isn't a plethora of cables sprouting out all over the place, and it still saves space on your desk, one key purpose of a mini machine. It's just cool, even if it won't make sense to everyone, nor for everyone. But let me know what you think. As always, leave your thoughts down below in the comments section. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to and you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see you next time.